All right, New York moving to ban e-cigarettes, the flavored variety, to Liberty File host, Fox Nation, so much more. Best-selling author, Judge Ed Napolitano. Judge, you had touched on this last week before many to say, well, we agree with everything you're saying about the danger and threat to kids, et cetera, but be careful what you wish for. What did you mean by that?
Very similar to what your prior guest was saying. People who no longer have vaping available to them will go back to cigarettes, which is probably far worse for them. As bad as vaping is, the cigarettes is worse. But I think this banning is going to backfire on them.
Now, I have my panel here with me. Any one of you can jump in anytime you want. But, Joe, this goes against the Republican grain, let business do its thing. But in this case, the argument is, and the president has espoused, it's kids.
I think that, number one, we have to do everything in our power to protect our children. Having said that, I'm kind of appalled by the thinking behind decision-making. So when we have a bad batch of mad cow, we don't say no one should drink any banned hamburgers. When we have E. coli break out in baby spinach, we don't say that we're going to absolutely, positively eliminate all salads.
They are lawful products for adults. They are not lawful products for children. So should the government be protecting children from themselves, or should their parents be protecting them? I mean, how much dissipation of parent responsibility and assumption of parent-like responsibility is the government going to accept?
One of the web's most talked about pro-vaping videos is an experiment comparing the effects of tobacco cigarettes and e-cigarettes on the lungs.
Here is the bell jar with cigarette smoke.
I mean, it just is so revolting.
Put out by none other than England's top public health agency.
My research shows that e-cigarettes are significantly less harmful than cigarettes.
Public Health England describes e-cigarettes as at least 95% less harmful than tobacco cigarettes.
I would agree with that, and actually I would go further. I think there's now evidence from looking at the cancer biomarkers that it could be as high as 98 or 99% for cancer.
To recreate the experiment by Public Health England.
This is going to look very yucky. You're going to see lots of brown and dark color, and that's what's going to simulate what goes in the lungs of people.
For about 2 hours, the NYU team simulated smoking 4 packs of cigarettes, comparing it to the same amount of vaping. The differences were plain to see.
So this right here, this is tar.
Yes.
The damage caused by cigarette smoke was obvious.
Look at that. This is only 4 packs of cigarettes.
So this much material, it might not all deposit in the lung of a smoker, but this much material is entering their mouth and entering the lungs.
Just nasty. Oh.
The vapor from a coffee-flavored e-liquid, not so much.
There's a little dampness. It smells like coffee.
Yes.
Public Health England is saying 95% less harmful. Think that is true or not?
I think that's a fairly accurate statement.
To me, I think the hysteria around vape is way overdone. I think for adolescents, not a great thing. For adults, no problem.
Oh, thank you.
And tobacco is the problem, not nicotine. Tobacco is what kills people. Nicotine is harmless. So if that keeps you off tobacco, dude, vape away.
Children, because of the flavors, right? It's more appetizing.
Right.
For
they
them.
need the adolescents. We're not talking about that.
Yeah, we're not talking
about that. Although there is a curious reduction in drug, alcohol, and tobacco use where you see high levels of vaping.
Really?
This has absolutely nothing to do with the open vapor industry. This has absolutely nothing to do with e-liquid. This has everything to do with black market THC cartridges that are sold illegally. I've seen no effort from the government to stop these black market cartridges from being sold on the street. Blood money for New York State. Blood money from the MSA. That's all this is about. Big Pharma, Big Tobacco, MSA, Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids. They get funded by MSA money. It pays to keep people smoking. It pays to keep people sick. Why is it here in America that we are the only place that is banning the sale of life-saving products? Meanwhile, in the UK, there are 0 deaths. There are 0 illnesses. This is disgusting. Master Tobacco Settlement Agreement. The agreement made between tobacco companies and states in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Isn't their number one priority preserving public health? Isn't that their job? Problem number 1. The more money Big Tobacco makes, the more money California gets. In 1998, a deal was struck between the biggest Big Tobacco companies and 46 U.S. states called the Master Settlement Agreement, or MSA. This agreement said that these big tobacco companies would make yearly payments to the states in exchange for the states dropping lawsuits against them regarding smoking-related deaths and expenses. The amount of money big tobacco pays the states each year is directly dependent on how much they sell. Problem number 2. The states spent that money before they got it. Most of the states wanted all that money up front, instead of waiting for payments from big tobacco each year. So they sold bonds to Wall Street based on the amount they calculated big tobacco would be paying them. But then something started happening. Americans started smoking less. Since 2000, on average, tobacco cigarette sales have dropped 3.4% per year. That sounds amazing, but not for the states like California. Remember those bonds they sold? They were counting on money from big tobacco, and since it's not coming, they can't pay back the bonds they sold, and either have to take money from other places or risk defaulting. Know the truth? The state of California needs tobacco sales to stay high, otherwise they default on their bonds. E-cigarettes are getting in the way of that. It looks like the health of the public isn't the top priority for the Department of Public Health. Their top priority? Their wallet.
Both England and some scientists here are looking at the best science, and we see the same thing. E-cigarettes are way less harmful than cigarettes, and they can and do help smokers switch if they can't quit. I think there's a very strong concern here that is more focused on both teens and the evil of the big tobacco industry that tends to distort the science and lead to exaggerated harms and omission of benefits.
So you're saying researchers are coming to that conclusion even though the FDA has not yet reviewed it and made that determination?
Yes, I think that's correct. The science has actually gotten extremely strong, especially in the last 3 to 4 years, and we've been following it closely. Probably the most powerful study is a randomized trial, which is the gold standard, that showed that in 12-month follow-up, e-cigarettes doubled the successful quit rate among smokers compared to nicotine replacement therapy. Which
know right now about the risks of e-cigarettes relative to cigarettes?
I think what we know for sure is that based on all the biomarkers of harm that we know from cigarettes, that they are far fewer and far lower in e-cigarettes than cigarettes.
That statement can't be made because you can't judge the long-term risk or benefit.
And that's true that we don't know the long-term risks and benefits, and we won't for 50 years. But we know enough now from the science of the biomarkers of harm, especially cancer, that show us that there are so few of those chemicals and at such low levels that e-cigarettes are biologically much less harmful in terms of exposure. The tar is a catch-all term for the essentially junk in the burning of tobacco. And that includes 69 known human cancer-causing chemicals, of which 10 or 12 are very potent. And we know what those are, and therefore we can look for them in the blood of people who've switched to e-cigarettes. And the FDA's own study of that, which is published in the New England Journal of Medicine, confirms that of 45 biomarkers, only 12 were detectable in e-cigarettes, and of those, none were at levels that approach those of cigarettes. So the biomarkers are very clear that there are less of them, and of those that are there, they are much less harmful.